Okay, welcome to the How to Podcast series. My name is Dave, and I have co-hosts on as co-hosts. There's three of us here in the room today, and I'm excited to have Angela and Stephanie. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of great co-hosting information and things about starting a podcast with a co-host. Lots of great things to learn and to experience together. Stephanie, let's start with you. Hello, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be so fun.
Excellent. Angela's here as well. Angela, hello.
Hello, I'm excited as well. Really love being on the show with you, David.
This is going to be so much fun. Now, I know that the two of you have a podcast together, and you two are well behaved. You are great together. There's not going to be any fighting or any drama. We're going to have a great time. It's going to be really fun. So tell us, Angela, tell us the name of your podcast again and a little bit about who it's for.
Our podcast is the Ink Mages podcast, and it is for anyone who loves books, fantasy, and just storycraft, really nerding out on the subject of fantasy. In fact, this October, I'm really excited. We are going to be launching into some author interviews, and we're going to be breaking down monsters and creatures in fantasy. And I think I'm really looking forward to that podcast. And I know Stephanie is as well.
Nice. Okay. Stephanie, tell me more about how this came to be, how the two of you started a podcast together.
Well, it was my publisher's idea. She encouraged me to start a podcast, and it sounded very daunting to do it alone. And Angela and I would Skype all the time and talk about books. And I think one time we just decided, have you thought about doing a podcast? And she said, yes, so have I. And we just thought, why don't we do it together? And that really is what launched us into doing the Ink Mages. And, we had to brainstorm the name and come up with the logo. And it was really a fun, creative process. And we've been having a blast since we started.
Nice. I like that. Okay. Tell me about the name. How'd you come up with the name?
We wanted something magical and that represented that we both write fantasy, that we're writers, and just to give people an idea that the subject matter is mostly going to be fantasy and epic fantasy. So we were bouncing around terms, and I think Angela said sage, and I'm like, mage. And we're like, wait, the Ink Mages. And so that's how it was birthed.
Nice. Angela, what are you learning about yourself as a podcaster now? What kind of skills and talents have you been able to develop just by having a show?
I think you don't know how much you know till you start being able to talk about it and explore all of the things that really, as a writer, you become a professional at, especially after you've written a few books. And even the idea of storycraft and world building, and even for me, exploring history and mythology, all of the things that writers do to understand their stories, that you really have become a master. And with that information, you can share it with the world. And I think another thing that I found unique about being an author and being on a podcast is how many other writers and readers love to be on that train. They want to talk about it. They want to nerd out about it. And I know for me, I think that's one of the funnest things about doing the podcast is you wait to be at that coffee table with other people who want to talk about this subject. They want to talk about fantasy and writing and all the things that they do. And this is something that appeals to an audience. And so for me, I was learning a lot about myself in that process, that I have a lot to say. I have a lot that I'm excited about. I have a lot to share. And there's a lot of other people who want to listen in.
Okay. So having a co-hosted podcast, I do that here on the How to Podcast series. And again, thank you guys for doing this with me. But what kind of work goes behind the scenes for somebody that's thinking about having a co-hosted podcast? Can we kind of talk about how you plan out an episode and who talks when and who does the research? And there's so much that goes behind the scenes. Stephanie, where do you even start with an episode? And kind of give us some groundwork about how the two of you actually do this.
Well, we'll have a list of topics that we want to discuss. We've also done polls asking our listeners what they would like us to cover. So on like a Monday or a Friday, we'll decide, okay, it's time to do a video, and we'll just pick one of those topics. And then as we go into StreamYard, because that's where we, record our episodes, I'll just say, hey, I'm going to introduce today. And next time Angela will introduce. And then we'll just start by asking the other person a question, and then the show gets started. Behind the scenes, there might be some legwork of designing posts on our social media to kind of just broadcast what the topic of our episode is going to be about. And I have become quite prolific with using Canva. So that task has kind of been given to me, and I'm totally fine with doing that. So I will usually give Angela a heads up. Hey, I just made a design for our next episode. I'm going to post it out to all our socials. Angela has been learning all the editing things for the video. And so I'm like super glad that she's taken care of that, because I am not that great at video editing, but I am excellent at designing posts. So that is definitely my gifting. So we divvy up tasks so it's not just one person doing everything.
So, Stephanie, do you think you would be doing this podcast by yourself, doing everything that the two of you do split up? Would you have done this show by yourself, knowing what you have to do?
Gosh, I don't know. It might have just taken me more time and watching more podcasts to feel like I was comfortable to do it. But honestly, I love having a partner. I love having a co-host, and I wouldn't want to just do it myself.
Angela is smiling. She's just like, aw. Yeah. So, Angela, from your perspective, would you be a solo podcaster right out of the gate, knowing all the things you know now? Would you have taken that path, do you think? Or do you really like this co-hosted thing?
I love being a co-host. I mean, again, it's kind of like a match made in heaven. I mean, for Stephanie and I just meeting as authors at the beginning of writing our books and being on this journey together. And then when the idea came up, I had also been thinking, okay, I should do a podcast. And it was just so intimidating. And I felt even insecure just being the only one talking, the only one with the information, the only one with an opinion. And it suddenly was an easy idea when both Stephanie and I said, hey, well, let's do this together. Then it was like, I can do this. And it motivated me to do the podcast. And even now that the podcast's out, I feel a little less insecure about it because I'm not the only one doing it. I'm not the only voice being heard. And so I don't have to cringe. I think everyone cringes a little bit, the sound of their own voice when they're not adjusted to hearing it yet. And I think that was probably part of one of my biggest obstacles. But with the balance of Stephanie and I going back and forth, I wasn't really allowed to get that insecure about what we were talking about, especially because I loved the conversation and I love the back and forth. And we so naturally do that anyway. And I think, just in the background before we start, we always say, okay, so let's ping pong this. Let's make sure both of us are being able to share. And so that's kind of something we kind of negotiate. If Stephanie has a little bit more information on topic, she might be the one to open and really give some of the points before we really break into the conversation. Or maybe it might be a subject that I know a little bit more about. So I might start out and line out some of the conversation topics. But for the most part, we really try to share and have a conversation. And no, I don't think I would want to do this on my own. I don't think I would have been as eager to do it on my own. And I don't know how much I would have continued on if I had done it all by myself. And the fact that we're doing it together makes me go, oh, we could do this for a very, very, very long time.
And I see Stephanie nodding her head the entire time you're talking, and I'm in total agreement with that. Doing a solo hosted podcast can be a lot of work. Everything resides on your shoulders. And if you don't record an episode, there's no one else there to keep you accountable, really. So if I don't want to record today, I don't record. There's nobody sending me an email saying, hey, are we getting together today or what? So it's kind of nice to have that back and forth. The one thing that I've noticed on other co-hosted podcasts, though, that I don't know how I feel about it, I want to put it to you, the two of you, to see what you think, is when you have two co-hosts on and they agree on everything. So it's like, what's your favorite color? Blue. What? Oh, that's my favorite color. Next topic. What's your favorite drink? I love coffee. So do I. Next topic. It's like you both agree on everything? Like you don't have any different opinion on any topic? It almost feels like we don't need the extra voice because you're just affirming everything that the other person says. I love when a co-host says, okay, Angela, but I see it this way, or I might approach it differently than you. And in that moment as a listener, my ears perk up because, oh, we're having a dialogue now. It's a difference of opinion. It's a different way of doing it, a different perspective. How did the two of you address that? Because when I listen to your show, it comes out, you do have some different opinions and different perspectives. How do you kind of deal with that as co-hosts? Stephanie, what do you think?
That's the fun part of doing the conversation is because we are both writers, but we approach writing differently. So for any topic that we discuss, if it's world building or writer's block, and we get into character development, we may each approach it differently. And so that's where the conversation really gets fun. And I think we can give great tips to our listeners because there's no one set model. You know, if I'm a pantser and Angela's a plotter, then we're going to be able to approach that subject from two different lenses. We may do, like with world building, Angela's much more factual, research driven. I'm just like, I make it up. So it's like, hey, we can appeal to both sides of the aisle when it comes to writing. And when it comes to reading, we like a lot of similar books, but there's books that she's read that I have not. So we can have a conversation that just flows naturally from one thing to the next by giving our different takes. And then, of course, it's fun to agree and banter and like, yes, I love that aspect, or I love that you do that so well. I could learn from the fact that you outline, so.
Nice. Angela, what do you want to add to that? That's great.
Yeah. And I think even for me, being on a podcast with Stephanie, I mean, Stephanie and I's conversations before doing a podcast, I learned a lot. I gleaned a lot from Stephanie. So I think just learning from each other during the podcast, for example, I am not a very great at grammar. I'm getting better. It's a skill I am forcing myself to learn, and I'm getting better and I'm growing in that skill. But when I finish a manuscript, it's a big mess that I have to clean up. Whereas Stephanie tends to, because she's an editor, she knows how to write a very clean first draft. And so I love to have that perspective that she brings with all of the things that I still am in the learning process of. And we get to glean from one another. And again, I'm historically based in my fantasy, and she is creating a world from scratch. And I just think I love to talk to her about that. And I think that's what helps the Ink Mages podcast be what it is, because I do enjoy hearing her, the way she crafts a story. And I do enjoy gleaning from areas where she has experience where maybe I don't as much, and giving that out to the listeners.
Okay. Co-hosting is like a dance. How do the two of you avoid from stepping all over each other's toes as you're doing your recording? I'm thinking of, I've heard other podcasts where they talk over each other. There's a sea of laughter, and you're like, as a listener, you're lost. You're like, I don't know who's talking now. How do you avoid stepping all over each other, Angela? What do you guys do?
Well, I know we do really very interview style with each other. So I think one of the things that we've come up with is we ask each other questions. So like I said, we kind of ping pong where we hand it off. Like, okay, I've said my piece. Now I'm handing it off to you, and we interview each other based off of the subject matter that we're talking about, and it makes it really easy. And allowing room, like you said, I learned this from you, and I try to apply it to the Ink Mages. Is it's the best podcasters are good listeners. So I really want to listen to Stephanie when she's talking and have a natural born question for her that's developing based off of our conversation. I mean, we have an outline that we go on, but we really want to make room for each other to breathe and just really speak about without feeling like we need to compete. But I do have to say, being a podcaster, I'm learning to giggle less. That's something that I wasn't very talented at the beginning. And making all of the sounds that you make when you're having conversation. And I'm having to coach myself to tone that down so that the person who's speaking can really be heard. They don't need in the podcast all of my background noise. See, there's another giggle. I have a hard time not giggling when I talk. And so I'm learning to kind of pull that down so that when we're going back and forth, that's filtered out.
So, okay, Angela, on that topic alone, I would encourage you not to squish it too much because that's who you are.
Right.
And who you are in the podcast is why I'm coming back. So don't change for me. Be you. But if there's things, I know I say the word so way too much. So I just did it. So when I'm doing my edits in audio formats, I remove a bunch of them just because I get bored of hearing me say the word so. I leave them in my recordings when I'm doing them like we're doing now, but I just know that that's one of my things to look out for the audio listeners, not the video in particular, but the audio. So I did it again. I will take those out so that I don't overwhelm my listeners with that certain word. I know there's people who say really like a comma. Whenever they're talking, it's like, so I went to the store and I went and got this thing, really? And I did this thing, really? It's like this little default they have in their speech. That's who they are. So I just did it again. You want to be able to create a podcast that reflects you as a person. So keep some of them in because that's who you are, but don't be so self-editing as Stephanie would as an editor. Don't be so self-editing in your podcast that you're afraid to be you.
That's good.
Right.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Do that as well. Yeah. Cool. Stephanie, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
I love Angela's giggle. I love my voice will squeak. That's something I laugh. I squeak. My voice goes up in pitch when I'm telling stories. So I don't know. I've just had to embrace that this is me. And so when I'm on podcasts, you're going to get my nerdiness, my silliness, my awkwardness, all of that.
Perfect. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Talk about StreamYard for a second. I haven't had a lot of people on that use StreamYard on a regular basis. Where did this decision come from? Did you start with StreamYard and using that platform? Give us some overview for those who have never used it, what you like about it, what it maybe doesn't do for you at the moment. Stephanie, what are your thoughts on StreamYard?
Well, my publisher was using StreamYard. So whenever we did events and book launches, we would use StreamYard because we could have up to 10 people in the video. And it worked really well. I got used to it because of that. We use the free program and it allows us to record easily and save and share our files. I know there's a pro membership, which gets you a little bit more perks, like you can add your logo and you can add a background, but those are things Angela has figured out for our podcast, how to do it in a different video editing software. So we're not too worried about the little perks that StreamYard has that we're not paying for at this point, but it's really user friendly. So I encourage people who are considering starting a podcast to try StreamYard just for a free recording service.
Okay, that's great. I've been using Riverside, having some troubles there. I love the people there, but just some things have happened that have kind of made me a little nervous about recording because I want to honor the time of my guests. I don't want anything bad to happen and have them reschedule. Angela, well, from your perspective, anything on StreamYard that you really love?
It's just been easy. I think that's my favorite thing about it. It's been easy. And I know you can even allow guests to sit in what's it called, the waiting room or the break room. So you could even start, let's say, a recording with just Stephanie and I, and then invite the guests to come in if you're doing the video at a later time during the interview. And they're sitting just kind of waiting to be invited in, and they know that you're there and they're going to be called in. And so I like that feature. I do like that you can, there are perks as far as making it look really cool when you're doing the recording. But like Stephanie said, we don't bother to do that because I use Canva and make it all pretty on the other end. So good. Since we do on our Ink Mages podcast, it's YouTube and Spotify.
Okay, so let's talk about that. You just brought that up. That's great. Talk about that decision to kind of go that way. Where did that kind of idea come from, Angela?
Well, we knew it was important to be on YouTube, and we definitely wanted to be brave enough to have our faces out there, to have the conversation, and with fiction especially. And that's where I'm figuring out with Canva, being able to put books that we're talking about up on the screen and really advertise what we're talking about while we're having the conversation. But YouTube is a very powerful social media resource. So being on a lot of the, iTunes and Spotify and all of that is really important also. But YouTube is a hotspot as far as being seen on Google. And I think Pinterest and YouTube are two of the highest social media platforms to be seen because they don't disappear. Whereas every other social media eventually fades away. Whatever posts you put on there, YouTube and Pinterest stay forever. So for us, there was a huge goal in doing a podcast for it to be on YouTube. And both Stephanie and I tend to be pretty creative. And so we wanted to be able to make a podcast that looked nice and that we could put on YouTube and have for people to either watch or listen to.
Okay. Stephanie, any plans to have the podcast more of an audio only format in addition to YouTube?
I don't think so. We love having the video side and the audio side because there are people who maybe don't get on YouTube, but they love just following podcasts for the listening because they're in their car while they're driving, or they're working at home, or working in a capacity where all they can do is listen. So I think having both branches is just the way to go moving forward.
Okay. There is updates. I don't know if you've heard all the updates right now, but YouTube is really promoting podcasting. And by the end of the year, via YouTube Music, you'll be available to hear audio-only versions of podcasts promoted, and that's a key word, promoted by YouTube out through YouTube Music. So I don't know if you've had a chance to ever look at the YouTube Music app. Even if you just take a look at it sometime, there are some podcasts that are already out there doing that. So there's no video, it's just audio. And the idea is someone can push play on their phone, put their phone away, and still listen to the podcast. So that is something YouTube is promoting for us podcasters. And the fact that you were there, and I checked, your podcast is labeled a podcast on YouTube. Good job. Well done. Well done. That's where they're going to pull from. So that's interesting. So you want to be there as YouTube is in the process of promoting that new feature within YouTube. So you'll be able to see the video on YouTube and hear your podcast on YouTube Music. That's huge.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is
Excellent.
awesome. Because YouTube, you have to have your phone on, I think. You have to have the screen on for it to play. So that'd be a nice feature where you are not wasting phone battery and you can just have it closed, but still hear our podcast.
That's amazing, right? So I'm really excited about that. The one thing about having it on other audio players is that there may be people who don't have access to YouTube or Spotify. So if there's someone out there that's like, I'm only on Apple, it's like I won't be able to access your podcast because it's not on the Apple player. So there's a way to actually do that if you ever wanted to in the future. It just opens a door for my podcast. I'm listed on an app in Africa called Afropods, and it's only in Africa.
Oh.
And they're looking for English-speaking podcasts to come on their platform. So I have listenership in Africa, and it's really a one-click setup, and I never have to touch it again. I just keep doing my episodes like normal, and they just take my episode and play it over there. I'm in India, 2 apps in India. Again, set it up one time and forget about it. It's all done. So it just expands your audience a little bit more, that maybe they don't have access through data, they don't have good Wi-Fi wherever they are in the world, that maybe they can access your podcast in a different format. It just might expand your reach a little bit more, and it's really a one-time setup. So it's something to consider.
That's good advice.
Yeah. Okay, so from when the two of you are recording and you're in your podcast doing the recording, how do you signal each other to know? I know you said you're going to ping pong off each other. Do you have any kind of cues that you use to know, because you're doing it via video so you can see each other? Is there anything that you do to kind of let the person know that you want to speak, or how do you navigate the actual recording itself? What do you do, Stephanie? How do you do that?
Well, we wait until the person is done talking. So if I've opened it up and I've asked Angela a question, I'm just going to listen to her talk until she is coming to a natural close. And then she may just ping pong it back to me and ask a question. But if she doesn't, I've been listening. And there are times where I'm like, okay, she just said something really good. I want to come back to that, or I have something I want to expand about that, or I want to applaud her for like saying that because this is a whole point we could discuss further. So then when she kind of is done, I will then, pick that out and say, that's a great thing that you said. I really like that. And then I'm steering the conversation and I'll steer it for a time. And then I might answer the question that I asked her, just to get my take on it. And then when I finish it, I pause, and then that'll open the door for Angela to either ask a question or she may say something based on something I brought up.
Okay. Angela, what else can you add to that?
I mean, I think that's one thing that's been just so fun with Stephanie and I is that we have a very natural banter. So it hasn't been hard to not run over each other or not really invite people to the conversation or invite each other into the conversation and keep going. I think the hardest part for us, and so far we've maneuvered it really well, is we don't know when we're coming to the wind up. We know that we only want the podcast to be so long, and we're like, okay, so are we gonna, I can tell we're both leaning in like, are we getting done now? Are we winding down? And usually I can tell, okay, Stephanie sounds like she's said what she's going to say. I've said what I'm going to say. And so far it's kind of been me. I'll just jump in there and end the podcast and run it down, do subscribe, tell them what's coming up next, end the video. And I know for some podcasters, they'll just cut the end off and then they'll have the ending, recorded and have it go along with music. And so far we haven't done that. We've just been able to go, okay, we're done. And intro out or outro the video. But that's always, I think we're kind of almost winking at each other a little bit going, okay, you're done, I'm done. And we can kind of get that feel, and we've been able to do it that way.
Good. I spoke with one co-host group, and what they use is a shared Google Doc. So they have it open on their screen and they can see, intro, points 1, 2, 3, and 4, outro. So they don't have to say, okay, Angela, are we going to the speed round now? Well, I can see on the sheet that the speed round's next. I don't have to ask you that. It's right there on the sheet. So I already know that you're wrapping up point number 4. We're getting close to the end. So when you're done point 4, and I can see you're almost done because I'm watching the document, and you're done. So I know it's my turn. So it's a nice little cue that happens off screen that just kind of keeps you on task so that you know what's coming next and you can bounce back and forth and you don't get lost. Because the one thing I noticed on some of the more unorganized episodes is they don't know what's next. Mm. And they're kind of asking each other, so what do we want to talk about now? I don't know. What do you want to talk about now? It's like, that seems like a little bit of planning that could have happened before you hit record. That maybe would have, for the listener, would be, I don't get the sense that you know where we're going here. So I like getting on a bus and the bus has the name of where it's going so that I know I go to the right location. When I come to a podcast, I'm kind of hoping the hosts know that we're heading this way so that I feel comfortable as a listener. So any little things like that we can bring in to kind of keep us organized, I think that really kind of benefits the listener as well. What are you doing to promote your podcast as co-host? I like that you share the work. What's working for you? What social media platform? What is working, Angela, for you to build your community around your podcast?
I think what's been really helping, particularly on Facebook and Instagram, we opened Ink Mage's Facebook page, Instagram page, and we share regularly when our episodes are coming up. And I think even on our personal pages, we're sure to share each other's information. We share that our podcasts are coming. And I think that's really, Stephanie, unless you got something to add, we've just really been good at sharing and trying to keep it in front of people as best as we can, getting the announcements out there that a podcast is coming up and trying to generate excitement in social media, word of mouth, that way.
Yeah, I agree. Everything Angela just said. Also posting questions. We've been just trying different things. It could be posting a picture of us in our recording, just to say, hey, an episode's coming, look for it on Monday, just so they can see our faces too. Because I think not everyone has caught on like who the ink mages are. So I try to do, that's why every post usually has a picture of us. So people know. So followers who are following just our author pages will realize, oh, they've got a podcast. So whenever we can just combine posts with our faces, with the ink mages and our books. And then what I've wanted to start sharing is tidbits, like little snippets from our actual podcast, and make a post just for like, here's a quote, here's a writing tip that Angela said. So just any way we can spread awareness and trying little things here and there just to change it up. So it's not always the same image every time for an episode.
Any thought about going live on Instagram together and pooling your two audiences together? So, Angela, what do you think? Like, because you have your own audience that knows you and loves you. Stephanie, you have your own audience. If you could combine them as like peanut butter and chocolate, like you could put these two things together, you could have like this massive group on Instagram that gets to see you do a live 5-10 minute little live Instagram video. That's kind of neat because Instagram goes, wait a minute, now Angela's group is now interacting and Stephanie's group's interacting with this live content. I think we're going to push this out. This is like good interaction for Instagram. Angela, any thought about maybe doing that in the future?
I think that's a really great idea, actually. And I know that lives in general tend to be very effective. So I think and we have a lot of pools of authors and readers that it would not only help the podcast, but each other and just promoting our books and what we do. And it would be a great commercial to what we're doing with the Ink Mages. So I think that's actually something that we need to put on our to-do list.
Another one, Stephanie, for you would be on YouTube. You can go live as well. And that's another whole thing you can do. The other thing one person was talking to me about was they record their episodes and they record them as if they're live, but they're not. They don't have the audience with them. What they do is they do premieres on YouTube where they release the episode on, say, Friday at 7 p.m. And then everybody that's following your channel knows and gets an invite to come and watch the episode launch live at 7 p.m. And you as the host show up and run a chat room while you listen to your episode being played and available on YouTube. Now you get to interact without having to record and push all the buttons and carry the conversation. You can just focus on the audience and talk to them as they listen to your podcast as a big group, a big family. Any thoughts maybe of trying something like that, Stephanie, in the future?
That does sound really awesome. I know my publisher does that too. We've switched to doing lives on YouTube, I believe. So, and it's true. It's awesome to see all the people who you have invited to for this event, and they come into the chat. And so in that sense, though, it is live. So we're not interacting with our recording, but we're just interacting with the people who are on, who are invited into the channel and then are just leaving comments in the chat. So that is fun. And I like the idea of making it a special event. So if it's like a holiday or it's like the first of the month, here are things to look forward to that we're going to be tackling for that month in our episodes. I could definitely see that being a fun option.
Good. That's great. Angela, any other thoughts on that as well?
Another thing that's been on my radar, something that I would love to do is just to create an Ink Mages commercial, one that can run on YouTube, one that can be running on your program, one that we can be putting out there that just maybe even has a little sampling of the audio and just introduces who we are. So that's definitely something I would like to do with all of those ideas. And I hadn't thought of doing that kind of interacting with the audience. So I really appreciate that suggestion because that would be something that I think would be really effective in getting our audience to really interact with us.
One little thing that I'm working on with Instagram is twice a week, I go through my new followers and I just send them a voice DM because instead of typing out a message to them, to click play on a voice DM, it's like, what is this? Like, they sent me a voice message? Who sends me a voice message anymore? So they actually get to hear my voice. And it's the voice of the person from the podcast. And it's like, you gave me a message. You took time. You can't do that in bulk. You can't hire a VA to do that. That's you. You're talking to me. And all I simply do is thank them for following and listening to the show. If you have any ideas for the show in the future, if you have a guest idea for me that I could bring on the show, would love to get your ideas and how we can make the show better. Thanks for your time and for being here on Instagram and giving me a follow. I really appreciate you. And the response is like, who does that? So that kind of interaction is always interesting as well. So the two of you, I have a practical question. You have one sign in for your YouTube. You have one sign in for your Instagram, Facebook. How do you share a shared access to all these portfolios and things because there's two of you? I know I can do it because I have all my passwords. How do you navigate as co-hosts who has access to post and all that stuff?
Well, we created a single Gmail email account. And then we shared the password. We have access to each one of them. I think the only hiccup was with Instagram. For some reason, when you are creating the account, there's specific information it wants, like where you live, your birth date. And so it's like we just had to pick someone. So at least with Instagram, I don't have access, but since it's linked to our Facebook account, anything I post from Facebook, I can just click share on Instagram. So that way I am still able to share it to Instagram without having to actually be, in control of it. And then I usually just send Angela a message through Messenger, say, hey, I just shared out a post everywhere on all the socials. And she's like, yay, thank you. So we're in communication on the regular.
Okay. Angela, anything else from a co-hosted perspective that maybe beyond the podcast itself and the recording that a new co-host should think about, that they should put in their plans, conversation back and forth, like, hey, what if we become millionaires? What are we going to do? Who owns the content? What happens if one of us can't do podcasting anymore for some reason? What do we do? Have you guys ever had those kind of conversations at all?
I think we're, because it's new right now, we're just running as fast as our feet can, go, and it's a new adventure for us. So we haven't necessarily explored those ideas yet. It's probably smart for us to eventually have those kinds of conversations. I would say some of the most impactful conversations we're having right now as co-hosts is planning out our future podcasts. We're not just letting the podcast happen, but we're actually thinking about, okay, what subject matter do we want to go over? How do we want to plan out when that subject matter comes out? Who are we wanting to interview? And just getting a plan so that we have shows ahead of time and we have a plan for where we're going and continuing to, and I think we're going to continue to have those conversations. If we run out of ideas, we're going to have another strategic meeting and come up with a bunch more ideas and keep it running that way. But so far, we're in the learning stages of being a fresh podcast and really just enjoying how much easier than let me rephrase that. We're enjoying that it's easier than we thought it would be doing a podcast. And so we're still kind of just taking those new, fresh steps and just enjoying doing it together, honestly. And I think we do have some plans of some of the things that we could continue to do in the future with it, but they're still evolving and they're still it's new.
Anything else on that, Stephanie, as well?
I love everything that Angela said. It's new, it's exciting. We'll come up with topics and then that we want to tackle and we do it. And we're just enjoying the now, I think, with it. And so who knows, like the future, where it's going to go. But I think we'll have these little strategic meetings as they are needed. And when we are not like meeting just to record, like those are times when we can just discuss things that we're noticing or we may want to try, before recording, when we're just Skyping for fun as friends to chat.
That's good. Stephanie, give us some more promotion around the podcast again. I'll put you on the spot. You get to do the commercial for the show right now. Tell everybody about the podcast, who it's for, and maybe as you work your way towards guests coming on the show, who would be an amazing guest for your podcast? Can you tell us more?
Well, if you are a writer or a reader and you love fantasy and you love talking storycraft, you will want to check out our show, the Ink Mages Podcast. You can find us on our link tree, the Ink Mages, and it has all of our socials. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X. We are on YouTube. We are on Spotify. So definitely give us, a look, put something in the chat, in the comments. We would love to hear from you. If there is any episode topic you want us to cover, we definitely take a look at that, and we want to tackle it.
Amazing. Angela, any advice for someone starting a new podcast as a co-host? Any things that you would say, now that I've done this many episodes with Stephanie, definitely make sure that you do these few things. Anything stand out?
Definitely, like you said, we haven't tried the Google document idea where we have a shared document. I think that's a really good idea to set up for us. But I think Stephanie and I are always sure to have notes and questions loaded and ready before we start our podcast and before we start recording. But I think the biggest piece of advice is just start recording, start discovering what your voice sounds like as a partnership, start discovering just that podcasting doesn't have to be the big scary monster. I think when you've never done something, it just seems daunting and it's a new unlearned skill. And for us, it was getting together that first time and going, hey, we can do this. Let's just push record and see what happens. And it was amazing. The resources that immediately flooded our way. We got to meet you. We got to talk to Stephanie's publisher and really figure out some of the things that we thought were going to be so hard just weren't. But starting the recording is the hardest part. And then after that, everything else kind of just can come together. And there's amazing resources like David's show, where you can find out more about podcasting. But I think the biggest advice I could give anybody is just start. You never know till you try and see where your feet can take you. And you will be amazed at what you have in you that people want to hear about, people who want to learn from you, the things that the gold nuggets that you're holding on to that might really help equip somebody else.
Amazing. And Stephanie, I see you nodding in agreement with everything that Angela is saying. What else would you add to that as well?
Yeah, that's what I always say is just start too, because you just don't know where it's going to take you. And I just say, don't discount yourself. Like if you're an introvert like me or an introvert like Angela and David, I know you are one too, that, hey, you can do it. You may surprise yourself at how good you are at it or how much you like it. And I think it's fun, the people that you can impact and give tips to. And I know we're super excited to have interviews. So we are looking forward to meeting authors and just fantasy nerds in general.
It's amazing. So everyone go check out the Ink Mages podcast. It is amazing. I am a frequent listener. When are the next episodes coming out? Give us an idea of what's coming next, guys.
Well, the next episodes are going to be, we have an interview with a fantastic author called X-Zombie. She is a middle grade author who writes the book series, The Wizards of the Apocalypse. And it's a fantastic, fun story. We're also going to be interviewing Nathan Keyes. That's coming up. He is the author of the Epic of Marindel series, and his adventure series is definitely worth a read. And he is a fascinating author that I enjoy talking to because he also enjoys history and mythology, and that's all twisted up in his stories. So he's an interview that is going to be coming up here really, really soon. And then also, like we said earlier, we're going to be having some monsters and beasts conversations about dragons and mythological creatures that is going to color all of October. So our next podcast is probably going to be releasing here in the next few weeks. So stay tuned, and I can't wait.
And you're going to send me that commercial that I can put in all of my shows and promote. So I'm looking forward to that email and that attachment coming. That's going to be great. And if you're thinking about starting a podcast and you're nervous about doing it all on your own, think about following Angela and Stephanie's example. Co-hosting might be the answer because you get to share the work, you get to hang out with your bestie and do this together, be accountable to each other, and grow as two people. So when I take Angela and Stephanie, two of the nicest people I've ever met, put them together, you have the best podcast in the world. So I would encourage you to go there, subscribe, follow, share, do all the things and make sure that you get in their world because it is an amazing podcast. And I'm thrilled that I've had both of you on my shows And that makes me happy. So thank you for the two of you making time to do this. I think we did it well. We did it well, the three of us. We made it through. So good job. Thank you, Stephanie. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, David.
Awesome. And Angela, again, thank you so much for your time as well. I appreciate you.
I love being able to have these conversations, and I love being able to be on your show.
Excellent. Everyone go check out the show notes, follow, do all the things. And thank you so much for being part of the podcast.